Gandang hapon po. There you go. Klase na ulit tayo. Fourth day. Day number 4. There you go. Klase na ulit tayo. Nadinig nyo? Alright, may monitor akong katabi para siguradong nalalaman ko kung tama yung aking screens. Alright, there you go. We're still waiting for 8 more. Pero meanwhile, gawin natin ay mag-attendance muna tayo. Alright, attendance. Attendance. Ayan. Alright. Importante attendance. Bakit? Practice. Kapag kulang kayo sa practice ng pagtulong sa bayan, pagsulong ng mga agenda ng bayan, when it comes to a point where you are challenged na tumulong sa bayan at kulang sa practice, malamang hindi nyo gagawin. Ngayon kung kagaya nan, practice kayo ng practice. Attendance check, bakit? Kasi nga pinangangalagaan natin ang resources ng bayan na ginagasto sa atin. O di pagdating ng panahon, ganun din tayo madaling gumawa ng pagtulong at pag-iipon ng resources ng bayan. Pagtulong sa bayan. Alright, attendance. Practice. Ano yung topic natin ngayon? Ito, binigay ko na sa inyo kagabi. Yan, may nag-thank you pa nga. Oy, thank you. Mr. Siason, Espinosa, Miss Espinosa, and Mr. Mencias. Alright. Salamat po. Yung ating topic for today, language. Alright. Technical definition of language. Maliwanag yan, technical. Hindi, excuse me, hindi commonsensical. Alright, hindi commonsensical. Alright. Okay. Balik tayo dyan. Language. Pero bago natin ituloy iyan, entertainment muna tayo. Mentimeter. Alright? Nasaan yung ating mentimeter? Advice ko kayo, itong ating mentimeter. Tungkol saan? Love. Para akong DJ Mr. Love. Nakita nyo ba yan? Yan. Nasaan na? Mentimeter natin. Yan. Love. Ito yung ating code. Just in case hindi mag-work yung link. Alright? Link plus code gives you this. Tingnan nga natin. Is love real? Sige nga. Sagot nga kayo dyan. Alright. Balik tayo dito. Alright. Is love real? Alright. Yan Nandyan yung link sa Google Classroom. Let's move on to Mentimeter. There you go. 1. Yes. Love is real. Real is love. Love is feeling. Love is real. 2. Expected. Yes. 2 lang. Bagal nyo naman. Okay. No need to break your neck Kung mabagal talaga yung inyong signal, huwag pilitin. Kung mabagal ang signal ninyo, stick to YouTube. Alright? Kung mabagal ang signal ninyo, stick to YouTube. Manood lang tayo. Uy, dami. Love is real. 5. Wala tayong outlier. Boring naman. Mas maganda pag no! Bakit? Na-busted ka ba? No. What do you mean by no? Pag-usapan natin yan. Yes. Exciting. Yes and no. Naloko na. May yes and no. No. Sige nga. Depende what you mean. Kaya yes and no. Alright. What do you mean by love? If you say, this is what I mean, pwedeng yes. If this is on the other hand what you mean, pwedeng no. Okay. Sige. Yes and no. Wala na. Gaano ba kaya karami? 27 eh. Nagtitipid ng data yung iba. Sige, di bale, tipid kayo ng data stick to YouTube. Let's move on. Syempre, lamang yung yes. Syempre naman, what is life without love? Next question. Presuming one does not have any linguistic expression for love, is it still possible for him to know what love is? Walang linguistic expression for love. Is it possible for him to know what love is? Yes. Talaga, papaano kaya? Yes. No. Kulit no talaga. Galit ka sa mundo, no, Mr. No. Sige na nga. Alright. Nawala yung yes and no. Napabilis, meron pala. Alright? Yes and no. Yes. Of course, depending on what you mean by the word love. Alright? Yung mga nagsabi ng yes, papaano naman? Sabi nga if you can express love not in linguistic form, you can express it in taste. February 14. Bigyan mo ng something sweet ang kaibigan mo. Love. Very sweet. Bigyan mo ng honey or something like it. Alright? Or donut. Honey dip donut. Sweet. Alright? Or you can express it given some painting expressing love. Or if not painting, sculpture. Or music. Music. Alright? Music. Walang lyrics. Music lang. Pwede. Lusot. Next question. One absolutely does not have any physical way of expressing love. So, walang physical way. Physical, hindi pwedeng kanta kahit may music, hindi pwede. Hindi pwedeng sculpture, hindi pwedeng painting, hindi pwedeng memes sa computer, hindi pwedeng, anything physical, hindi pwede. Still possible for him to know love? Answer, no. Hindi pala no, ano? No answer. Sige na nga. Dalawa, yes. Papaano naman? No. Papaano nga naman? Papaano? Uy, no, dalawa. Umabol. Yes and no. Lumamang yun, no. Uy, palaisipan na, bumawi. 5, 4, 1, 1. Dun sa 5, umabol pa dun, yes and no. Uy, ganda, tong, 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 tong. Parang scale ng gitara o kaya ng piano, no? Dun sa 5, you say yes. Paano? How do you tell anyone without any physical expression? Sige nga, tanong natin. Paano? Nothing. No physical medium. How? How do you halimbawa lang, how do you say anything without your tongue, without your eyes, without your body movements? Show, don't tell. How do you show? Alam mo, Mr. Gabonada, if you show, you use your body. Physical din yun. Parang parang sign language, alright? Physical, papaano. Verbal, verbal nga, gagamit ka nga ng dila, ng bibig mo, physical din yun. O, papaano. Emotions, when you deal with emotions, you deal with feelings, di ba, Mr. San Juan? When you deal with feelings, you deal with what? You deal with pheromones, physical yon. You deal with nerve endings, physical din yon. You deal with hormones, physical din yon, Mr. San Juan. O, hindi pwede. Paano, di ba? O, parang, ano naman tanong, di ba? Stupid question. Daling manloko, no? Naloko ko na kayo. Alright, yan lang yung last question natin. Oy, dumami 8. Yes, paano nga? Palaisipan. Alright, let's go to our technical definition of a language. Ano yung topic natin? Ang topic natin, if you remember, alright, language. Ayan. Language, technical definition of a language. Why technical definition of a language? Aber. Alright? Ulitin natin, ha? Kamali na naman ako. Alright, yan. Take a look. That's our topic, language. Ano yung topic natin? Technical definition of a language. Why technical definition of a language? Kasi, halimbawa ito, this is a commonsensical definition of a language. Alright? Ano yung example natin? Commonsensical definition of a language. Ito nga, ayan. Anong sinasabi niyan? Alright? Anong sinasabi niyan? Sinasabi niyan, the method, what is a language? The method of human communication, either spoken or written, consisting of the use of words in a structured and conventional way. Highlight on the expression spoken and written. Commonsensically, pag sinabi niyong spoken and written, the assumption is, the assumption is spoken, di nadinig mo. Pag sinabi mong written, ano ibig sabihin? Di nakita mo. So either you use your ears or you use your eyes. Yan ang ginagamit natin for human communication. May problema. Bakit? Kasi, pag minsan, you cannot see it, you cannot hear it, but you can feel it, di ba? Braille. I'm sure you're familiar with Braille writing system. So, hindi pwedeng nakita lang, hindi pwedeng nadinig lang, pwede na feel mo rin. But early on, I already said so. You can express, in other words, communicate as a human. Alright, human communication, di ba? Human communication. You can express as a human, paano? With your sense of taste. Sabi ko nga, February 14, o kaya birthday. How do you express your love? Di magbigay ka ng something sweet para express mo, yan ang kahalagahan ng ating samahan. Very sweet. Alright? Or, conversely, kung galit ka, magbigay ka ng pagkaasim-asim na mangga at saka may pagkaanghang-anghang na sausawa ng mangga. Oh, yan ating pinagsamahan. Alright? So, you can express in terms of what you see, your eyes, what you hear with your ears, what you feel with your sense of touch, what you taste with your sense of taste. And, of course, you can also express yourselves in terms of what you smell. Meron nga tayong entire industry on the basis of smell, di ba? Pagka, special occasion, maglagay kayo ng sangkatutak na perfume or sangkatutak na cologne, samahan mo pa ng pheromones, di, lamang ka na, nagayuma mo na yung kaibigan mo. Alright? So, gusto natin technical definition of a language. Alright? Technical definition of a language. Yan ang gusto natin. Alright? So far, so good. Anything na palagay nyo kailangan idagdag natin? Okay, tingnan na natin ang comments. Alright, within the scientific context here, one does feel love from complex chemical interactions. That's right, Mr. Iringan. But when you say chemical interactions, you mean physically available chemicals. Alright, na nag-i-interact. So you still need some physical form. Alright, very good. Balik tayo. So what is a good technical definition of a language? Alright? Bakit language in the first place? What's our interest in language? Alright? That's one example of, your Egyptian hieroglyphics, example of physical expression using language. Alright? Understanding of how the ancient Greeks have considered knowledge requires understanding of the nature of languages. Why? Remember, pinaliwanag natin. Ano yung pinaliwanag natin? Pinaliwanag natin na unique ang reflective method, unique ang method of reflection ng mga Greeks. Remember? When they reflect, you see a tree, you remember? You see a carabao, all right? Do you remember that example? There is some reflection of the tree in our heads, in our minds. There is some reflection of the carabao in our minds. Yes, you remember that? We express that. Yes. And these items in our minds, all right, these items in our minds, the reflection of our world, are supposed to be expressed in linguistic form. They may be in our minds in some picture form, but inevitably, we summarize as if in some algorithm, all right? Mr. Iringan, tama ba? In some algorithm, we express in linguistic form what used to be pictures in our minds. Tama? So you have the expression for all free-falling bodies, F equals ma, instead of thinking about that apple all the time, falling over your head. Remember? So we don't think all the time in terms of our images in our minds. Alright? May nahulog na apple sa iyong ulo dati. Pero later on, you don't think about it anymore. Alright? You express your experience with it in the form of some linguistic expression, and you summarize, for all free-falling bodies, F equals ma. That's one thought in your mind. And what else? You can have another thought in our mind. Whenever the sun rises, it rises from the east. You don't think of the picture of the sun. You think of in terms of the thought. And the thought that energy equals mass times acceleration. All right? You don't think of some candle light going through some piece of vacuum, or some electrical spark going through some piece of vacuum. You express it in some linguistic form. All right? When we are born as infants, despite lack of linguistic expressions, we know things. Things like, you know when to cry and when not to cry. We know things like, when as infants, you know when you're hungry and you're not. All right? Those kinds of knowledge are what we might call genetic forms. But you see, not all knowledge is genetic. Not all of knowledge is genetic. Some forms of knowledge are linguistic. In fact, there are more forms of knowledge that are linguistic. You know, the expression, today the sun has risen from the east, yesterday the sun has risen from the east, The day before yesterday, the sun is risen from the east. All right, the day before, etc. As a rule, whenever the sun rises, it rises from the east. Tomorrow, if the sun rises, it will rise from the east. You remember, very unique mag-isip ang mga Greeks. And they think that these thoughts of ours in our minds are linguistic in nature. So, before we understand how coherence, remember, before we get to understand how coherence happens in our minds, you remember coherence and what? Harmony. All right? Before even understanding coherence and harmony, the first thing that we need to do is ask the question, what are these tools in our minds that we have? And the answer is, for the Greeks and for us now, well, for the most part, these tools are linguistic in nature. Ergo, our interest in the nature of a language. What is a language? We will use the definition of William P. Alston. O, ayan yan ha. We will use the definition of William P. Alston, which is found in the Collier's Encyclopedia. If you cannot get one, well, at least you have this here. All right, we will have that as our main definition for our class, the technical definition of language, our definition of a language, thanks to William P. Alston. William P. Alston is a first-rate philosopher who has just died fairly recently, matandang-matanda na. Very prolific writer in philosophy. Sikat siya sa United States, professor ng maraming Ivy League schools. And this is what he says. A language is a system of units, realizable in some sensory medium, only certain combinations of which have meaning by convention, and hence useful for communication. Ulitin natin para hindi tayo nawawala. Alright, so ulitin natin. What is a language? A language is a system of units realizable in some sensory medium, only certain combinations of which have meaning by convention, and hence useful for communication. All right. First things first. It is a system. All right. Nakikita ba? Ulitin natin ha. It is a nasaan yun? Ito. System. Question. Alright. Question tayo ngayon. So, supposing you have a domain. Alright. Supposing you have a domain. So, supposing this is your domain with your boundaries. Alright. You have things in it. Alright? Now, let me ask you a question. What's the difference between a mere pile of things? Just a pile, you know, a bunch. For example, a pile of numbers. Let's talk about numbers. Oh. Supposing you have a pile of numbers and a system of numbers. A mere pile of numbers compared to a system of numbers. What's the difference? Oh, may clue na ako. Tingnan nga natin. Sige nga. Sagot nga kayo dito. Pile. System. What's the difference between pile of numbers or bunch of numbers and system of numbers? Okay. Uy, may sumagot. There is order. Oh, galing naman. Yes, Mr. Mogads. Order. Anong ibig sabihin ng order? Another term for order is organization. Ang galing. Coming from the expression, organism. Remember, what's an organism? It's composed of many, many things. All right? An organism is composed of many, many things. Some of those things you call organs. Some of those things you call tissues. Some of those things we call cells. Some of those things we call organelles. And organelles are somehow related to cells. Cells are related to tissues. Tissues are related to organs. Organs are related to systems. And there are many kinds of systems. And there are many kinds of organization. Yes? In other words, the difference between a system and the file, sinabi nga ng kaklase nyo, ang galing naman. Hoy, mga repeater ba kayo? Kaya nyo alam? I'm just kidding. Alright, merong order. Yes. Merong organization. Question, how do you know you have organization when you see one? Answer, madali lang. Alright? When you have organization, alright, how do you know? Yan, may unity. How do you know? Tama, may unity. Sabi nga ni Pythagoras, di ba, may coherence. Mr. San Juan, tamang-tama, eksakto. Coherence, harmony, may unity. Ito na nga ngayon. How do you know you have unity, coherence, or harmony? Ano ba yan? Pipisil-pisilin mo, amoy-amoyin mo. Uy, tikman mo to. May order, di ba? Nalalasa mo ba yung order? Tama si Miss Belyesa. Sabi ni Miss Belyesa, to be able to identify order is to see the patterns. Oh, galing ha. To see the patterns. Ayan, sakto. Woot, 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 woot. Alright. Anong gusto sabihin ni Miss Belyesa? Ganito yan. Galing ni Miss Belyesa. Okay, ganito yan. Kung meron kang, alright, let's just say, meron kang something, whatever that is. Meron kang another thing, whatever that is, and another thing, whatever that is. What happens? Well, suppose you relate this to this. Whether quantitatively or qualitatively, whatever, bahala ka. And then you relate this to this. And then you relate this to this. And so, because you're able to relate something to something to something, what do you end up with? You end up with a pattern. You end up with a, sabi nga ni Ms. Belyesa, you end up with a pattern. And in this case, what's the pattern? The pattern is some kind of a triangle. All right? So, if you have a domain, and you relate many, many things to one another under some matrix, you know, like neural networking. Neural networking, we'll go to that. Pag nirelate mo yan lahat na yan sa isa't isa, one way or the other, sa dami ng mga relationships, makakakita ka ng pattern. Alright? Like the pattern na nakita natin, one day, another day, and so many days, the sun is risen from the east. And because of this, we express the pattern in some rule. Yes, and we express the pattern. What's the pattern? Whenever the sun rises, it rises from the east. Yes? And so, what do we say? Well, if that is the pattern, then tomorrow, if the sun rises, it rises in the east. All right, there you go. All right, unique way of thinking ng mga Greeks. All right, they're interested in how we get to see the pattern in our minds. In this case, the first pattern that we have to deal with has to do with the patterns of linguistic expressions. Alright? Ano yung mga patterns ng linguistic expressions natin? Alright? Now, supposing you have all of these expressions, does that therefore mean you already have a language? Well, even if you have all those expressions and they are not governed by rules, medyo malabo. So you have to have the rules. The rules that we use to express the patterns, the rules that we use to express the patterns, we call them, all right, the rules that we use to express the patterns, We call them rules of grammar. Alam nyo na yan. Rules of grammar. Alright? Now, yung rules ng grammar, merong 4 na klase. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright? So far, so good. So we're interested in what? In some system. And the system involved patterns. And the patterns altogether as rules are called rules of grammar. And there are 4 of them. Now, the first set of rules are unique in the sense that they are internal. The first set of rules are unique in the sense that they are internal. Internal. Yan. Okay? So far, so good. Bakit internal? Well, fortunately, all of us are bilingual. Yung iba nga sa inyo, multilingual eh, no? Ako, bilingual lang ako eh. Marunong ako ng Filipino, marunong English, tapos dalawa lang. Yung iba sa inyo, marunong na English, Filipino, Ilocano, tapos Chino pa, oh, lamang na. Now, internal means the rules of syntax. You see, each language have unique rules. Rules that are internal, syntax, X. Rules that are internal in the sense that they are unique to the language. Halimbawa, ano ba yung unique sa language na English at unique sa language na Filipino? Alam nyo na yan, bilingual kayo eh. You know that when you translate from English to Filipino, there is gain or loss of meaning, di ba? Tama ba? Halimbawa, sa English, napaka-importante sa atin ang tense. Rules of tense, di ba? Tense, 20s, 30s, 40s. I'm just kidding. Andali, inom lang ako. Ano yung rules of tense? Past, present, future tense. Di ba? Meron ganyan. O, tanong. Yung bang Filipino at English pareho ng value pagdating sa rules of tense? What do you think? Well, pag akong tinanong nyo, hindi pareho. Sa English, pagka nagkamali ka ng tense, malaking disgrasya. Lalo na pag may nililigawan ka. Pag nakita, ay, bulok sa grammar, mali ang kanyang tense, naloko na. At kaya mga taga-UP, hindi basta nanliligaw sa hindi taga-UP. No? Gusto natin magaling sa grammar. Alright, balik tayo sa usapan. Okay. Internal, bakit? Kasi sa Filipino, halimbawa, ang rules ng tense, meron tayo, pero hindi stricto. Compared to English. Ang English, napaka-stricto sa tense. Pagdating sa bahasa Indonesia or bahasa Malaysia, bahasa Malaya, ang tense nila ay very trivial. Practically, walang tense sa mga expressions ng bahasa. So sa English, stricto, Filipino, medyo, sa bahasa, hindi. Magkakaiba sila ng internal rules. Alam nyo na yan, hindi ko na dadagdagan pa. Kaya yung mga bilingual, alam nyo na merong internal differences ang ating mga rules ng language. Alright? Now, yung sunod, meron namang rules ng language, external. External. Bakit? Paano naging external? Naku, mahabang paliwanag. Alright? Tandaan na, external. Bakit external in nature? Well, ganito yan, ha? Nabanggit ko sa inyo, bilang mga pilosopo, mahilig tayo sa reflection. Alright? Mahilig tayo sa reflective method, sabi nga natin kanina. So, what are we talking about? Excuse me. Supposing, meron kang puno dito. Alright, sige, puno. Meron kang pet kalabaw dito. Alright, pet kalabaw. Meron ka ditong mga bundok. Ayan. Meron ka ring mga rice fields. Ayan na nga po. Meron ka ring clouds. Okay, sige, clouds. Nandiyan, meron kang mga ibon, alright? And then, meron kang bahay. Yan, yung bahay mo. Bahay kubo. And what have we said? Somehow, these are all reflected in our minds. Alright? Somehow, these are all reflected in our minds. So, what's the point? Well, halimbawa, ito, something reflected in your mind, you give it a name. Bahay kubo. Alright? Bahay kubo. Yan. And then ito, you give it a name, puno. Alright? Ito ano? Pet. Pet kalabaw. Alright? What's the point? Notice, this involves your language. What is in your mind involves your language. Alright? Now, we already said, within your language, these expressions relate to one another under some pattern or set of rules we call syntax. Alright? They all relate to one another under some syntax. Alright? Internal. Notice that you have here a separate universe or system. Right? Ito na lang. Notice you have here a separate system. We call this our world. So, between our world and our language, we assume some kind of a relationship. This related to this related to this related to that, and many other relationships. In fact, what do we say? We say that between our linguistic expressions or the universe of our linguistic expressions and our world or our universe, there is some kind of relationship. Yes? Yan. Itong relationship na ito, governed by rules. Alright? Yang relationship na yan, governed by rules. Alright? Yang relationship na yan, governed by rules. Notice that when you say this system is related to this system, this kind of rules somehow go beyond this system. Alright? Over and above that system. Outside. Alright? Outside. In other words, external. Alright? These external rules, we call rules of semantics. Alright? The moment you begin, the rules of semantics. The moment you begin relating your language, alright, to something beyond the language itself, in this case, your world, then you're dealing now with another set of rules called semantics. Alright? So there you go. The second set of rules of grammar are called rules of semantics. Yan. Semantics. Very good. So far, so good. Nasusundan, ha? Check ko nga. Nasusundan, ha? Okay. Balik tayo dito. Ngayon, etong dalawa na ito, rules of semantics or rules of syntax, etong dalawa na to, yan yung isa, ito yung isa, sila ang necessary components of any language. Necessary. Pag wala niyang dalawa na yan, halimbawa, kunyari lang, Halimbawa, meron kang rules of language, syntax lang. Kagaya ng syntax ng chess, the game of chess. May notation pa yan, may syntax yan. Yung chess, next question, all right, sige, you have the language of chess, you have syntax of chess. Next question, kunyari lang ano ang kinalaman ng language mo? Ano yung language mo? Chess. Anong kinalaman ng language ng chess sa iyong mundo? No, kung nasaan ka. May kinalaman ba yan? Alright, next question. Halimbawa, yung bang rules ng chess ay directly applicable sa buhay ng tao? Nakakita na ba kayo ng tao pag naglalakad ay letter L? You know, pag ganun tumakbo, pag ganun, pag ganun, parang kabayo ng chess. Wala naman eh. Alright? Between the world of chess and your world, wala naman kayo assumption na necessary relationship eh. Hindi kagaya ng inyong language. Very naturally, between your language and your world, you assume that there is a very important, valuable relationship. Not just a matter of accident. Yung chess, meron niyang relationship sa buhay niyo, accidental. Pero hindi niyo basta masabi yan pagdating sa language. Merong unique relationship yung language and your world, one way or the other, right? Although, in some way, ang rules ng language ay may arbitrariness, pero hindi kagaya ng arbitrariness ng chess. Alright? Hindi kagaya ng arbitrariness ng chess. Okay? There you go. So, anong gusto nating sabihin? Ang gusto nating sabihin, kagaya nga kanina nabanggit ko, hindi pwedeng meron kang language na meron lamang siya nga syntax. Hindi pwede na merong language na meron lamang siyang syntax. Kailangan may syntax at may semantics para maging kompleto ang iyong language. Alright? Okay. Pagka yan dalawa meron, ang tawag natin doon sa language mo ay well, useful, of course. But beyond useful, alright, masabi natin siya na non-trivial. Conversely, pagka yung language mo ay meron lang siya ay syntax, di trivial yung language mo. Pag ito lang ang meron, trivial. Pagka meron ito at merong semantics, non-trivial, very useful, very reliable. Alright? Now, lahat ng non-trivial, useful languages, whether it is a natural language, or a computer language, or language of mathematics, or some other language, lahat sila may syntax, may semantics. Ngayon, meron namang uniqueness ang natural languages. Bakit? Ang natural languages may additional rules. Halimbawa, rules ng pronunciation, hindi ko na ipapaliwanag sa inyo yan, pinag-aralan niyo yan nung kayo ay preschool. Phonetics. Alright? Do you remember phonetics? A is for apple. Alright? B is for baboy. Alright? Natatandaan nyo, phonetics. Dagdagan natin ng S. Yan. Phonetics. Talaga naman. Ang hirap na walang blackboard. Hindi pa ako sanay. Alright. Ano yung rules ng phonetics? Your rules of pronunciation. Alright? Natural languages, meron yan. Pero ang computer languages, wala yan. Ang mathematics, wala yan. In addition to phonetics, meron pang isang requirement ng rules. Alright? Question. Nakakita na ba kayo ng word na merong 10 syllables? Meron, di ba? Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Alright? Meron. Nakakita na ba kayo ng word na merong 10 syllables and then all the syllables are expressed in vowels? Well, unang tanong, expression na may 10 syllables and all expressed in consonants. Ang labo. Alright? Sunod na question, expressed in vowels. All vowels, 10 syllables. Meron ba niyan? Oh, seryoso ako dyan, ha? Meron ba? Sa German, meron? Hindi, sa German, merong 10 syllables. Alright, alam ko yan. Yung kay Mr. Mencias, 10 syllables, all vowels. 10 syllables, all vowels. Meron yan. Alright? Well, let me tell you. Let me show you. Alright? Di ba, nagbabasa kayo ng Marvel Comics, tsaka AC Comics? Ay, hindi pala. DC Comics. AC sabi yung kuryente. Alright? Kunyari, merong isang building. Alright? Kunyari lang, may building dito. Oh, yung building nandyan. Alright? Building. Alright? Tapos, yan yung karsada. Tapos, may nahulog na tao dyan. Ano mangyari? Sisigaw siya, Di ba? Alright, what am I talking about? Well, I'm just kidding. Nabobore ako dito. Mag-isa lang ako eh. Ganito. Alright? What are we talking about? Alright? Ano ang ating mga rules? One rule. Syntax. Alright? Rules internal to your language. Alright? Syntax. Yan. Rules internal to your language. Ano yung second rule? Set of rules. Semantics. Alright, semantics. Ano yung third set of rules? Phonetics. Now, sabi nga natin, yung syntax at semantics, yan ang required sa lahat ng mga non-trivial languages. Ito required sa natural language. Meron pang-apat. Ano yung pang-apat? Ito na nga yun. Rules involving syllables. Alright? You see, halimbawa, sa Indo-European, alright, Indo-European. Yung Indo-European languages, ang mga syllables on their own, walang meaning. Pero if you go to Asia, with monosyllabic languages, single syllables can have meaning. Halimbawa, sa Pilipino, sok-sok. The expression sok has a meaning on its own, sok-sok. And then, laylay. The expression laylay has a meaning on its own. Pag pinagdugtong mo yan, suklay. Alright? Suklay. Sinusok-sok mo sa ulo mo and then lumalaylay ang buhok mo. Suklay. Alright. In Indo-European languages, single syllables do not have meaning. In Asia, single syllables can have meaning. Meaning to say, syllables can be governed by rules. Whatever these rules are, the rules of syllabigation or rules involving syllables, they are called rules of morphology. Alright, what are these called? Rules of morphology. Alright, morphology. Ang rules of morphology required dyan sa natural languages. Kagaya ng phonetics. Etong dalawa na ito, only sa natural languages. Etong dalawa na ito, required sa lahat. Alright? Ang interest natin sa philosophical analysis at logic ito. Itong interest natin. So, language is what? A system of units realizable in some sensory medium. Alright? Sunod na portion. Una muna, ano nga sabi natin? Language is a system. Alright? It is a system governed by order, organization, rules. Alright, and the rules are called rules of grammar, and there are 4 kinds of rules of grammar: syntax, semantics, phonetics, and rules of morphology. The units are called terms. What are the units? They are called terms. Alam nyo na yan, pinag-aralan nyo yan sa mathematics, di ba? Terms. Well, yung expression term ay hindi lang importante sa mathematics. As a language, it's importante sa lahat ng languages. Alright? It's importante sa lahat ng languages. Terms. Alright? Tingnan ko nga. Meron ba kayong comment? Yung book sa Pilipino, Propjerry, ay may kahulugang pagsisiwalat kung idurugtong sa ilang letra. Buklat, bukas, buksan. Oh, ang galing ha, Mr. San Juan ha. Usap tayo minsan ha. Kasi interesado akong baka marami akong mapulot sa'yo, Mr. San Juan. Kasi kailangan nating i-translate ang mathematical logic. Parang physics, ano? Mathematical logic into Filipino para yung pangkaraniwang Pilipino mas mahasa ang pangangatwiran, ang reasoning. Onomatopoeia, tama, Mr. San Juan. Kaya importante yung onomatopoeia sa Asiatic languages. Balik tayo din eh. Alright, terms. Terms, ayan. Yung terms, maraming klase. Sa natural languages, nabanggit ko na sa inyo, maraming klase ng languages. Sa natural languages, yung terms are called words. Pero merong ibang languages, kagaya ng computer languages, hindi words ang tawag sa terms. Terms are called bytes. Bytes, yan. Yung mathematics, if you will consider it as a language, alright, terms are called terms, but for the most part, terms are actually numbers. Although they are actually called, depende sa klase ng number, they are actually called terms also. Alright? Yan. So, you move on from one language to another, nagbabago yung expression ng term. Alright? Meron pang ibang languages, saka na natin pag-usapan, iba yung kanilang expression for terms, like sa mathematical logic, ibang tawag. Alright? So, for our purposes, whether it is with mathematical logic, or with mathematics, or with computers, or with natural languages, we will simply call them terms. Alright? Language is a system of terms governed by grammar composed of syntax, semantics, phonetics, and morphology. Yan. Yan ang ating definition. No? Haba ng paliwanag. Excuse me. Ngayon, kadugtong ito, realizable in some sensory medium. Yan yung ating questions kanina. Papaano kung walang physical way of making your expression? Alright, ano yung mga sagot nyo kanina? Ano yung mga sagot nyo kanina, no? Sabi nyo, nasaan na ba yun? Through emotions. Sabi ko nga, Mr. San Juan, pag may emotion, merong hormones, merong pheromones, merong receivers ng hormones and pheromones, merong sensors ng hormones and pheromones. You need to be able to sense what is being communicated physically, either through your eyes or through your sense of smell, so that you can now sniff the pheromones and the hormones and so on and so forth. Alright? Pag walang physical medium, paano? Yung nga ang tanong natin. Alright? Now, let me give you an example. Alright? Balik tayo din sa ating Google Classroom. Meron akong ipapapanood sa inyo, optional. Manood kayo ha. Ano yung optional? Alright, ito. Ang title ng sine, ito, Johnny Got His Gun, an award-winning movie. If you have time, panoorin nyo yan. Bakit? Ito yung paliwanag niyan eh. Ano yung paliwanag niyan? Yan, nasa Wikipedia. Press natin Wikipedia. Johnny Got His Gun. This was a novel in 1938. Oh, and then became a film in 1971. Oh. O ano yung novel? Well, ito. Joe Bonham, a young American soldier serving in World War I, awakens in a hospital bed after being caught in the blast of an exploding artillery shell. He gradually realizes he has lost his arms, his legs, and all his face, including his eyes, ears, teeth, and tongue. And that his mind functions perfectly, leaving him a prisoner in his own body. Ha! Grabe. Nangyari yan eh. Sa Austria somewhere. But the point is, supposing you are that fellow, all right? Si Johnny. You wake up, and what? You think you are dead because you cannot see anything. You cannot hear anything. You can smell, but you don't hear, you don't see anything. All right? You try to speak, but you cannot speak. Why? Because you have no tongue, because they took away your jaw. All right? But you're still alive, but you don't know that. And so you think you're in hell. And after a while, ruminating with your mind, because your mind is fully functional, you realize that in fact you're not dead. And guess what? It takes you days, maybe weeks, to be able to conclude, I'm not dead, I'm still alive, I'm probably in a hospital. Then finally, concluding you're still alive, you have a second problem. What's your problem? How do I know I'm awake or I'm asleep? Problema. And then finally, you develop a system, and now you know when you're awake, when you're asleep. And then next problem, how do you communicate to everybody else what you want, what you need, what you feel? Alright? Hindi mo pwedeng emotion ng iyong kamay, wala kang kamay. Hindi ka pwedeng magsalita, wala kang jaw, wala kang tongue. Wala ka namang legs na kakawag-kawag, para kang uod doon sa iyong bed, gagapang-gapang. Kawawa ka naman, di ba? Alright, but that can happen. Supposing you feel so tortured, you want everybody to let you die. Please let me die. Or conversely, you want to tell everybody, you know, I'm in such a terrible condition, but expressing my love for God, I want to live on and show God what this world is all about despite my condition. So, let me live. Eh, biglang naramdaman mo, hindi ka na pinapakain, hindi ka na pinapainom, and apparently, gusto kang pabayaan na lang to die a natural death para hindi ka naman daw kawawa. So, big question. You're that soldier. All right? You are that soldier. How do you express to anyone you want to die or you want to live? Oh. And that's when you realize that communication using any language, you need a physical medium, a physical material medium. In the absence of any physical material medium, no language, no communication will be possible. Even when you communicate to yourself, you need your nerve endings. We will deal with that when we deal with neural networking and other matters and artificial intelligence. The point is, no sensory medium, no physical medium, no communication possible. That's related to our question earlier. How does love exist? If you cannot express love in words, if you cannot express love in any physical means, including your computer encoding, you cannot express your love in terms of your brain neural networking encoding, then it does not exist. Nobody talks about it. Nobody thinks about it. All right? So far, this may be radical, but keep it in mind. Bottom line, language involves some physical material medium. All right? Language involves some physical material medium. Physical. All right? Physical material medium. Apparently, even the Greeks knew that. Ibang klase. All right? Physical material medium. Guess what, Mr. San Juan, for example, when you have something that is physical or material, say an object, that means literally you can sense it. Alright? Sino nga yung mahilig sa science kanina? Sino nga yun sa Mr. Nasaan na yun? May nabanggit sa inyo tungkol sa science eh. Hiringan ba yun? Nasaan na? Wala na. Well, anyway, ayan, si Mr. Iringan, tama ako. Alright, Mr. Iringan, nabanggit mo science. Alright, anong sabi sa science? If it is something you can sense, therefore physical or material, then it is something you can observe. Tama? Observe. Conversely, if you can observe it, it is physical or material. Yes. Meaning to say, linguistic expressions are observable. They are physical material. In other words, they are tools. Tools. Alright? Bengarium leviosa. Alright? Sa sini lang yun. Walang magic ang words. Alright? Walang magic. Linguistic expressions are tools, no different from your pair of shoes or your pens or your notebooks or your cell phones and computers now. They are tools. Tools, therefore, that you use. All right? Do not forget, tools that you use. All right? So, back to our definition. Your languages, they are your tools. You are the masters of your tools. You decide how these tools are going to be used. All right? They are physical, material tools. All right, let's move on. Only certain combinations of which have meaning by convention. Only certain combinations of which have meaning by convention. Oh. Okay. Now what? Well, take a term. All right, take a term. Supposing you have a term. And then, of course, you're able to use the term, which means that term, because you're able to use it, will mean something. In other words, when a term is useful, precisely you mean there is meaning. All right? You mean there is meaning for your term. Meron kang term, merong meaning. Ang tanong, how can you describe the relationship between a term and its meaning? All right? Remember, when you have order, you mean there is something that you relate to another thing, which you relate to another thing, which you relate to another thing, yes? Now we're asking the question, what's the relationship all about? All right? That's the point. You have a term, you have a meaning. How are they related? All right, supposing you have a triangle. All right, triangle. Take one interior angle of a triangle. Notice that if this interior angle changes in magnitude, what will happen? This means this exterior angle will change in magnitude, yes. And if this exterior angle changes in magnitude, what would that mean? That would mean this other exterior angle will also change in magnitude. Oh. So, question, how do the angles relate to one another? We say that they are related to one another in some functional relationship. All right? Predictable, functional, or if you want, mathematical relationship. Mathematical relationship. Question, is this relationship between a meaning and its term functional? Is this relationship between a meaning and its term mathematical? I will guess your answer will be no, hindi sila functional, hindi mathematical. All right. Now, next question. Excuse me. Supposing you have a mother and a child. O mother and child. Ay, naloko na. Mahirap mag-drawing nito. Sandali. Mag-iisip pa ako. Huh. Supposing you have a mother and a child. All right, mother. How do you draw a mother? I do not know. Something like this. And a child. Ayan. All right, mother and a child. Okay. Mother. Child. All right. Yan. Chino. Parang ako. All right, question. How is a mother related to the child? Well, you can describe the relationship. You can say the relationship between a mother and a child is natural. Yan. Nakikita nyo ba? Alright? Yan. Hopefully nakikita nyo. Natural. Alright. Or you can say the relationship is biological. Natural, biological. Tanong, is the relationship between a mother and a child natural? Yes. Is it the same relationship between a term and its meaning? No. Is the relationship between a mother and a child biological? Yes. Is the relationship between a term and its meaning biological? No. Obvious naman, ano? No. So, tanong, pardon the expression ha, puta na, ano yung relationship na yan? Magic? So, eto na yung ating sagot. How shall we describe the relationship between a term and its meaning? All right. If you live among the Inuits, alam niyo ba ang ibig sabihin ng mga Inuits? Tingnan natin. Inuits. All right. Encyclopedia Britannica. Nasaan na yung search nila rito? Yan. Inuits. Ano ba yung mga Inuits? All right, the people of the Arctic region. Yan ang mga Inuits. All right? The people of the Arctic region. Yan yung mga Eskimo. All right? Okay? Yan. Tanggalin na natin to. Oops, mamaya yan. All right. So, what now? Well, among the Inuits, there are more than 200 ways of calling snow, snow. More than 200. Actually, 200. Well, anyway, more than 200. More than 200 ways. Sa Pilipino, sa Pinoy, gaano karami ang ating expression sa sa snow? Well, among Pinoys, ang expression natin, dalawa. At the most, tatlo. Ano yung expression natin? Ice. Ano pa? Snow. Alright. Marami pala, Yellow. O ano pa? Niebe. Alright. At the most, 4. Hindi pala, At the most, 4. Yan. Compared to 200. Bakit ganun? Kasi, for survival ng Inuits, dapat alam nila yan. Pag maglakad ka sa maling snow, pwede kang mamatay. Mahulog ka dun sa ilalim ng snow, kainin ka ng avalanche. Alright? Excuse me. Ang mga Pinoy, walang problema dyan, except pagka bibili ng halo-halo. Pero mind you, ang mga Pinoy, we have more than 2,000 ways of calling rice. Rice. Alright? Merong sinandoming, merong dinurado, merong sipor, merong 2,000 nga eh. Ang mga Inuits, walang expression for rice. Bakit? They've never seen it. So tanong, bakit may ganong pagkakaiba? O kanina, nakita niyo ito. Yan ang itsura ng mga artist na barkada, well, example lang yan, no? Ng mga barkada, halimbawa ni Paul Gauguin, contemporary ni Jose Rizal na artist, at Vincent van Gogh, kaibigan niya. Yung mga artist na yan, nagkalat yan doon sa bayan ng Bohemia. Yung Bohemia kasi, yung mga artist na walang pera, inimbitahan ng baroness ng Bohemia. Tapos binibigyan niya ng pera, na equipment for doing art, binibigyan ng bahay and stipend. Eh di nagkalat doon yung mga artist, ganyan ang itsura, parang si Vincent van Gogh. Ang tawag sa kanila, Bohemian, kasi nakatira sa Bohemia. When unconventional ang itsura mo sa Europe and later all over the world, ang tawag sa'yo, wow man, ang Bohemian mo naman. But later on, yung pagiging Bohemian, nagbago ang tawag. Ganito na itsura. Ang tawag sa kanila, beatnik. Yung mga beatnik, mga panahon niya ni Ernest Hemingway at saka ni F. Scott Fitzgerald. At yung mga artist na yan, mga intellectual na yan, Nobel Prize winner pa nga yan, si Ernest Hemingway, ay mga tambay doon sa Paris, kaya uso ang beret, kasi Paris. Kasi sa Paris, nandun yung magandang music scene, nandun yung magandang intellectual scene. Bakit? Magandang tugtugan dyan, jazz, and some other kinds of music. Bakit? Yung mga musikero sa Amerika na magagaling, pinapatay ng mga puti. Kasi naka-invento ng bagong music. Ang tawag ay ragtime music, later became dance music, later became jazz music, and so many forms. Kaya lang, yung mga puti, ang tawag nila nun sa music ng mga African Americans ay music of the devil. Nung pinapatay, pumunta ng Paris, pumunta ng France, at doon tambay ang maraming intellectual, kagaya ni Ernest Hemingway at kung sino-sino. At doon sa mga bar kung nasaan yung music, doon tambay ang mga ganitong mga mga beatniks. Bakit? Kasi sila mahilig sa music, they like the beat. Alright? They like the rhythm, man. Alright, parang ganito. Wow, man, it's the rhythm, man, it's the rhythm. Wow, man. I like the music, man, I like the music. Eh di naloko na. Bakit? Eh kasi nga, ganyan ang dating, mahilig nga sa music, edi ang tawag sa kanila, beatniks. Mahilig sa beat. Alright? Ngayon, bakit ganito itsura nila? Kasi nasa France, may beret. Bakit lagi nakasalamin? Kasi mahilig sa damo at saka hashish. Kasi doon sa France, hindi bawal ang marijuana at saka hashish. Eh pagka hindi magandang tama ng beer or liquor, i-sniff na lamang ng marijuana or hashish, eh pumupula yung mata, kaya laging naka-shades. Tapos laging may dalang mga musical instrument kasi nga, mahilig sa beat, kaya beatniks. So yung dati, na ang tawag ay Bohemian, yung sumunod na generation, ang tawag na ay beatnik. Pero yung mga beatnik later, naging eto, generation ko. Wow, man, alala ko nung panahon ko. Woo! Kaya tuwa ako, mahaba na uling buhok ko eh. Alright? Balik tayo dito ha. Pakita ko sa inyo. Kasi nawala yung pakita ko eh. Ulitin natin. Nung unang panahon, ito yung tawag dyan, Bohemian. Alright? Yung mga katulad ni Vincent van Gogh, ni Paul Gauguin, tambay dun sa Bohemia, mga artist, napaka-Bohemian ng itsura. Unconventional. Ibang klase. Pero one generation later, yung what used to be called Bohemian, later came to be known as beatniks. Pinaliwanan ko na nga. Yan, naka-shades kasi nagmamariwana. Mahilig sa beat kasi uso yung magagandang bagong tugtog at kantahan sa 20th century na uso dun sa Europe. Dun sa France, kaya naka-beret. Alright? Unconventional ang ugali niyan. Paupo-upo nga sa sidewalk, etc. Mga beatniks. Yung iba may dalang gitara at kung ano-ano pa. Pero yung sumunod na generation ko na yan. Ano yung generation ko? Sabi ko nga, ang generation ko, alright, kami ay long hair. Dati ang buhok ko hanggang dito. Tapos ako may tali dito. Tapos may bulaklak dito. kakalat-kalat ako sa UP. Alright, sa UP, paikot-ikot na dyan. Pag ganun-ganun ako, peace man, yeah man, peace man. Alright, ayaw namin ng nuclear war. Ayaw namin ng Vietnam War. Ayaw namin ng environmental degradation. Kaya yung generation namin, umimbento ang tawag, Earth Day. Alright, back to nature kami. Ang pantalon namin parang pangwalis ng karsada, bell bottoms. Ang aming pantalon halos mahulog na dun sa aming hips. Mababa kasi. Kaya ang tawag doon sa pantalon namin, hipster. Tapos meron kaming malapad, ganito kalapad yung aking sinturon. Ganyan kalaki yung buckle. Parang pag nadapa ka, hindi ka na makabakon sa laki ng buckle. Hipster, napakababa ng hips. Hipster, later came to be used to identify us. Ang tawag sa amin, hippies. Kasi mahilig kami sa bell-bottom hipsters. Long hair. Peace, man. Tapos meron kaming pendant. Pendant ko parang ganito kalaki. Parang sinlaki ng tawag doon, bibingka. Alright, ang tawag sa amin ay hippies. Yan. Ganito ang itsura namin, Very colorful kami yan. Ganito ang itsura ko noon, Alright, may bulaklak pa. Kung ano-ano. Alright? Tawag sa amin hippies. Pero later, yung mga hippies, uminit ang ulo. Kasi hindi pinapansin, pinapabayaan ng mundo yung environment. Sa galit nila, naging mga punk. Galit na sa mundo. Yan. Later, yung mga punk, lalo pang uminit ang ulo, naging mga hip-hops. Yeah, man. Who let the dogs out? Oh. Alright? Yan ang itsura ng mga hip-hops. Alright? So, anong pinag-uusapan natin dito? Alright? Balik tayo dito. Yung term, dito natin, Yung term, related sa meaning. Alright? Kaso, across time, pag across time, nagbabago ang panahon. Nagbabago ang context, historical, economic, cultural context. Noong una, ang context, iba, panahon ni Vincent van Gogh, Paul Gauguin, ang tawag sa mga ibang klase ay Bohemian. Nung panahon ni na Ernest Hemingway, panahon ni na F. Scott Fitzgerald, nagbago ang context. Ang tawag doon sa mga dating Bohemians, tinawag na sila na Tinawag na sila na beatniks. Panahon namin, ang tawag hippies. Panahon ng mga tatay siguro ninyo, ang tawag hip-hops. Ngayon, ang tawag na panahon ninyo, ano ba? Mr. San Juan, ano na ba ang tawag ngayon? Ang tawag yata ngayon jumping jologs. Alam nyo kasi, dito sa UP may concert. Lagi. Pag may concert, dami na palang mamaya ko na lang balikan Jumping jologs. Bakit? Kasi yung mga Jeprox, by the way, kaya Jeprox ang tawag nung panahon namin, nung pag bumibili ka ng damo, doon ka nakakabili sa Project 7, Project 6, Project 8. Ayaw mong malaman ng pulis, doon ka papunta, kaya ang tawag Jack Pro. Pero yung Jack Pro, naging Jeprox. Kasi ang mga tao doon, itsura Jeprox. Alright? Now, what am I talking about? Jumping jologs. Bakit? Kasi pag nanonood yung mga Jeprox ng mga concert dito sa UP, may bakod. Doon sa bakod, gusto nila makita yung nandun sa loob, kaya tumatalon-talon, parang Mexican jumping beans. What are we talking about? From Bohemian across time, alright, from Bohemian across time, naging beatnik, naging hippie, naging punk, naging hip-hop, naging jumping jologs, hindi ko na alam, pabago-bago. Nagbabago yung context. Yung context ng mga Inuits, maraming snow. Context ng mga Pinoy, walang snow pero maraming palay, maraming bigas. Alright, so changes means terms and meaning, the relationship changes. Kaya ang tawag natin sa relationship nila conventional. Alright, coming from the word convere, to come together and agree. Conventional. Alright? Now, another way of looking at it, kasi by accident of nature, yung mga Inuit doon pinanganak, hindi nila choice. By accident, ang mga Pilipino dito pinanganak, hindi nila choice. In other words, whim of nature. Yung whim of nature, in a way, ang dahilan, kaya ibang kultura ng mga Eskimo sa kultura ng Pinoy. So, conventional on one hand, at the same time, arbitrary. Yan ang sinasabi natin. Arbitrary. The relationship between a term and its meaning, while on one hand can be said to be conventional, alright, conventional, it can also be said to be arbitrary. There you go. So, what is a language? A language is a system of units realizable in some sensory medium, only certain combinations of which have meaning by convention, and hence useful for communication. Now, eto ngayon, communication, focus down. Bakit? Lahat kayo tao. Alright? Ano ngayon? And hence useful for communication. Dahil kayo lahat ay tao, hindi ko na ipapaliwanag anong ibig sabihin ng communication because the capacity to communicate with a language is genetic. Let me repeat. The capacity to communicate a language is genetic. And therefore, natural sa inyo to understand what communication is, so no need to explain. Alright? So, what's the primary function of a language? Primary. The primary function of a language is communication. Now, while it is the primary, it is not the only important function of a language. The capacity to communicate, that's the most important, pero not the only important function. Meron tayong matatawag na secondary function. Secondary function. Ano yung secondary functions ng language? Alright? Importante sila but not equal to communication. Lamang ang communication. This is more important. Alright? This is only secondary. Alright? Now, yung secondary functions, tatlo. Alright? Yung secondary functions, tatlo. Yung isang function, ganito. Yung sinabanggit ko na sa inyo, yung capacity to wield language is genetic. Now, your genes, in other words, your genes, your alleles, your chromosomes, can only carry the equivalent of 10,000 characters. That's it. 10,000 words if you like. That's the most. Pero notice, if you have English, ang English language ay 1.5 million ang words. All in all. Samahan nyo pa ng Pilipino, samahan mo pa ng Cebuano o Ilocano, lamang ka na. So, anong ibig sabihin yan? Mas maraming paraan na magagamit ang language, kagaya ng English, to transfer and accumulate knowledge. That's one important function. Transfer and accumulation of knowledge. Hindi nyo alam from first-hand experience kung tatay ba ninyo o nanay ba ninyo kasama nyo sa bahay. Hindi nyo nakita na kayo binunot sa nanay ninyo. Yung mga birth certificate nyo, malay nyo, fake. But you claim that you are the sons and daughters of your parents. Alright? As a matter of knowledge. Bakit? Na-transfer sa inyo from one person to another using what? Language. Filipino, English, Cebuano, whatever. Alright? You know the earth is round, pero hindi pa kayo nakakalabas na earth. Paano nyo nalaman? Kasi nalaman nyo galing sa iba. Alright? Thanks to language, civilization is possible. And civilization is possible because we're able to transfer and accumulate knowledge. So yung alam ng mga naunang henerasyon, alam nyo rin. Alam ko rin. Alright? That's the first secondary function. What's another secondary function of a language? Notice, na kunyari lang, example, Mr. Mencias, uy, may hipsters pa rin pala, Mr. Mencias. Very good. Example, Mr. Mencias, gusto mo mag-date. Saan pinakamagaling mag-date? Pinakamagaling mag-date, manood kayo ng MMA. Alright? Mixed martial arts tournament. Bloody. Alright? Supposing ikaw, martial arts, marunong. Dahil marunong ka ng martial arts, masasabi mo, eto ang galing, eto hindi. Bakit? Eto ang bilis ng kanyang turning side. Very accurate ang kanyang turning long. Ang kanyang axe kick, tamang-tama ang timing. Alright? Etong isa, bulok. Bakit? Puro 45 lang ang alam. Tapos tatanungin, paano nga yung girlfriend mo hindi marunong ng martial arts? Well, sasabihin ng girlfriend mo, eto magaling. Bakit? Nanalo eh. Eto bulok. Bakit? Natalo eh. Bakit bulok? Natalo nga eh. Bakit natalo? Kasi bulok nga. Bakit nga bulok? Kasi natalo nga. Mamaya, suntukan na kayo ng girlfriend mo. What am I saying? Thanks to your language, you perceive better. Language facilitates perception. Alright, language enhances perception. Facilitates perception. Facilitates perception. Alright? That's a secondary function. Pag kumuha kayo ng exam sa UP, yung UPCAT, remember, ang UPCAT maraming word meanings. Well, nung panahon namin, ewan ko sa inyo. Bakit? Kasi with more word meanings, the more you can see. With more words, the more you can see of this world, of this universe. Alright? Kaya sa science, ang katutak ng mga terms niyan eh. In fact, kalahati yata ng English language, puro scientific expressions eh. Alright? The more you can see when you have more terms. Now, remember, when you have a mind, what you see of the tree gets to be in your mind as a reflection, yes? So, the more you can see means also the more you can think. Yes? Kaya sa UPCAT, nabanggit ko nga, malaki ang portion na maraming word meanings. What do words mean? Bakit? Kasi, alright, anong ibig sabihin ng mga words? What do they mean? Maraming word meaning kasi pagtaas ng number of words, alright, pagtaas ng number of words, alam natin pagtaas ng IQ. Alright? Pagtaas ng number of words, pagtaas ng IQ. Bakit? Kasi, dahil nga, pag marami kang words, mali. Sorry. Sabi nga natin, pag marami kang words, marami kang nakikita. Diba? Binanggit natin kanina. Marami kang nakikita, perception. Alright? More words, more you can see. Now, yung pangatlo, ibig sabihin, more words, more you can think about. Alright? Language facilitates thinking. Alright? There you go. 3 secondary functions of a language. What are the 3 secondary functions of a language? 1, facilitates transfer and accumulation of knowledge. 2, facilitates perception. And 3, facilitates thinking. So, meron tayong primary function, which is communication, and secondary function, facilitates accumulation of knowledge, facilitates perception, facilitates thinking. Pasensya na po, humaba ang kwento natin. Nagkwento pa ako sa mga JPROX kasi. Kung meron kayong mga comments, please put them down here sa YouTube o kaya sa ating classroom, Google Classroom. Magandang hapon po. Thank you for accompanying me, end of broadcast, kasi alam ko may klase pa kayo. Okay, gandang hapon.